So in the first part of our discussion of photosynthesis, we kind of just talked about the structures that are involved, the basic inputs and outputs of photosynthesis. And can you tell me what the inputs of photosynthesis are, which we call reactants? What are the reactants of photosynthesis? What goes into the equation? Sunlight is huge, yes, that's one. Sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. Yeah, that's what our plants need to make energy. And what are the products or the outputs of the photosynthesis reaction? What do we get as a result of that? Glucose and oxygen. Yeah, okay, so those are the key, that's kind of the big picture. That's the forest concept, but now we're going to dig down in the trees and really look at the details of that process. So there's two reactions that occur when we talk about photosynthesis, and they're paired reactions. One feeds the other. So there's the light reactions, which are requiring sunlight. So here we see sunlight coming in and water to drive the light reactions. So questions or concepts that I want you to be aware of is, for one, what are the inputs for the light reactions and what are the outputs for the light reactions? So the inputs, according to this diagram, are what for the light reactions? Yeah, solar energy and water. So the water is used in the light reactions, because we already said water and carbon dioxide and sunlight are the overall reactants, right? We're now going to break it up into these two sub-reactions, which is the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. So the light reactions take solar energy and water, and what do they produce? What's the output of the light reactions? And you can just see it in the diagram here. It's going into the chloroplast, and what comes out? Yeah, ATP and oxygen, and we also create these special coenzymes to pick up electrons, which are in the form of hydrogen atoms, right, that are going to carry energy to the next step. So we'll talk about that. So the light reactions, water and solar energy going into the chloroplast, and where do the light reactions take place? It's all right here on this lovely summarizing diagram. Specifically in the chloroplast, where? There's different parts within that chloroplast. Yeah, the thylakoid membrane. So the thylakoid membrane is where the light reactions occur. And remember, that's those kind of little stacked discs there. And what do we call a stack of thylakoid membrane? Do you remember the term? Granum. One is a granum, a stack of them are grana. Yep, so one individual membrane we call the thylakoid membrane. So we're producing energy here. So here's where the energy output occurs, is in the light reactions, right? Because we made ATP, and ATP is the energy molecule of our cells. So we used water and light and converted that to oxygen, ATP, and NADPH. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yes, very good question, and we're going to see it coming up here very shortly. Yep, definitely. So that space between those little stacked discs within the disc, inside the disc, yes, we're going to see what happens there. So that's the light reactions. And then the other reaction is the Calvin cycle. And the Calvin cycle, what are the inputs of the Calvin cycle? It uses what other part of the photosynthesis reactant? Carbon dioxide. And what does it make? That thing on the bottom, CH2O, is a sugar molecule. Okay, so it's just kind of a generic sugar molecule. So it makes sugar. And where does the Calvin reactions occur? Where do the Calvin reactions occur? And what is the stroma? Do you remember? Yeah, it's like the cytoplasm. It's the liquid inside the chloroplast. So the reason why it occurs there is because there's enzymes in the liquid of the chloroplast, in the stroma, that drive these reactions. Okay, so notice that the Calvin cycle not only uses carbon dioxide, but it uses two other things that the light reactions produced. NADPH, yep. And then it dumps off, it splits the ATP, and it pulls a hydrogen off of the NADPH, and where did that hydrogen go? If you just look at what it's produced, it took a hydrogen off of NADPH, and where did it go? Into the sugar, yeah. So it pulled that and put it onto the sugar, okay? So pulled off the hydrogen, added it to the sugar, and that's those oxidation reduction reactions where one is oxidized, one is reduced. So the way to remember it for me is carbon dioxide has a hard C and Kelvin cycle has a hard C. So and it makes a carbohydrate, which has a hard C. So carbon dioxide enters the Kelvin cycle, making a carbohydrate, okay? So that's where the sugar is made. So we call these not the light reactions, the dark reactions we could call it, because do we need sunlight for this half of the reaction? No, okay. So 2 reactions, we're gonna really analyze those in the video that I have in Blackboard. Looks like this, and this is in our Blackboard folder. It's called Animation for Photosynthesis. So we're gonna watch that now. All right, in the Blackboard folder, I posted this nice little handout here, and after watching the video, you can fill all those parts in, and then at the end is this nice diagram. So let's look at our word bank here to make life easy for us. We'll just start with this one, and then we'll go to this one to fill them into the diagram. So let's start with these squares here. What are these? Well, it's representing the yellow arrow. So which of those? Sunlight, yep. Or light, I think, is just in your word bank, right? Light. Yep, yep. The answer here then, lungs around that one, is photosystem 2. And this one over here is photosystem 1. Okay, so we have light striking these pigment molecules, right? And then what happens here, we're going to have, right? And hydrogen ions are pumped. What do we call this special thing that uses hydrogen ions? Yes, this is the ATP synthase pump. All right, and then we have thylakoid membrane, because that's where we're buried in here right now. And then let's come up here. So we have an enzyme called NAD plus reductase. So we're going to reduce something, which is here. What are we going to reduce? NADP plus goes here. And then we're going to add hydrogens to it, right? And then it becomes NADPH, yep. Well, we're taking this enzyme, and this is NAD plus, because we're going to add hydrogens to it to become NADPH down here. And this is oxygen gas. I think someone who proposed that. Yeah, this would be oxygen gas. The hydrogen atoms are here, this line. I just don't like how that dotted line makes it look like it's hydrogen atoms too, but it's oxygen.
So that means that the other square is the plus sign, so that red line follows?
Yeah, this coming down is H plus, yeah. So this is oxygen gas here when water is split, and the H plus is coming through this protein pump, creating this gradient, and that flows through the ATP synthase pump, and this is H plus down here. So what do we get when we add a phosphate to ADP? We get ATP. So together, NADPH and ATP is going to go to the Calvin cycle. Very good, Calvin cycle. And what do we call this space out here? The stroma. Good.